As an activist, one of the most important tools we have is refusal to be intimidated, is rejecting intimidation and fighting back and saying, no, intimidation you will not succeed with me. The problem we have had in Kenya and in many countries across the world when you have authoritarian regimes is that people fear. And part of the things for me, as I see, is to make sure I show to myself and to other people around, I don't have fear. We can't have fear. Fear allows people who are in positions of authority to trample over us. I see my role as trying to catalyze Kenyans to organize themselves to stand up to this. Impunity is the process in which people who are in power especially can do things that are wrong, do things that are absolutely illegal, but they get away with it simply because they're powerful. So, in March 2013, Kenya held a presidential election, the first under the new constitution. One of the candidates, Uhuru Kenyatta, and his running mate, William Ruto, had been separately and individually charged by the International Criminal Court at The Hague. That was despite the fact that the new constitution that came into place in 2010 had very clear provisions about qualities of leadership that were necessary for people to be able to become leaders in the country. These charges related to the violence and the crisis that Kenya had in the previous election of 2007.
At the close of 2007, the people of Kenya suffered through one of the most violent episodes in Kenya's history. During that period, more than 1,000 people had their lives taken from them. Over 3,000 people were brutally maimed, while others were sexually violated. Hundreds of thousands of families were forced to flee their home in panic. The crimes that were inflicted on the people of Kenya during that period deeply shocked the conscience of humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my mandate as the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to investigate and prosecute those who I believe to be most responsible for those crimes, irrespective of their status.
Mimi pamoja na wenzangu, kuna waliobakwa, kuna waliochinjwa, kuna waliokatakatwa, wamama wakabeba sehemu zao za mwili za bwana zao. Mambo ikafanyika, watoto walipotea, watoto walikuwa wanajazwa kwa malori, wanamwagwa.
Vitu zetu zilipotea, naye pia sisi pia tukarepiwa. Mimi nilirepiwa, vitu zangu pia zilichukuliwa, nikakuja na mkono tupu.
Wakanikuta kwa njia, vijana walikuwa 6 na kila mtu alikuwa na mishale. Nikawakataza, nikawaambia tafadhali msinipige mishale. Wakasikia vile niliwaambia, wakarudisha mishale, wakatoa vishu ilikuwa kwa malongi yao. Halafu ndio wakaanza kunikata nikifanya namna hii, nikifanya namna hii, nikifanya namna hii, wakakata.
Tukaona wameanza kuchoma manyumba na pia sisi tukafikiwa na tukawa tumeadhirika. Watu wakaanza kuuawa, manyumba ikaanza kuchomwa.
When you go out to different parts of the country, victims and survivors still exist and the anger has not gone. Partly because the numbers were so large. Even calling them numbers, it's dehumanized them. When the election process started, we had two leading candidates already indicted and charged with crimes against humanity. And it was almost inevitably clear that one of the reasons why they were so determined to be candidates was because they wanted to be able to marginalize and push back these charges. So we come now to the first election under the new constitution in 2013, and there's very, very high expectations. Very soon after the voting process starts, we get information that the EVIDs, the machines that identify us from our thumbprints, were not working in most parts of the country. My papers. Left. Umekata?
Let us try again. Try to wipe it. Maybe it is moist. A little moist.
Yeah, maybe it's sweating. You know, this is a big moment.
Okay, try again.
So what do we do now?
I just type in your details and then
I have registered. I even have that card they give you.
let me just type it.
Yeah, let's go. Just test that. See if the system is working.
Yeah, you are there. Verified your details.
But it's not work on the. Why didn't it not work?
Maina Kiai.
It's a seminal moment, and it's a moment also of accountability. And it's an issue of human rights primarily as well, because there's a right to vote that we have.
I think this person who was registering people at New Kitusu made a lot of mistakes.
Our registration center says Lower Kabete, but the polling station says Parasila Primary.
Right.
So we are here. We've checked with the machine outside, it's not there. We were told to come and check with the manual register, but it's not there. So she's asked us to go.
The main issues that arose on the voting day was firstly for me the fact that the machines weren't working, and that the electronic safeguards we were expecting to give us confidence that this election is different from the last one didn't work. I think the other thing that was also very, very significant was the long lines and the long delays. The other bit of it is people coming to vote and they don't see their names. They can't find their names on the register that's supposed to be there.
This is the SMS I received confirming I have registered. I am now being told by the Deputy Returning Officer that I cannot vote because my details do not appear in their system.
Hello madam, habari za leo?
Nzuri.
Iko nini?
Nilikuja huku kitu 12. Tangu saa hizo nimepanga line, nimefika hapo mbele za 10. Jina yangu haipatikani, nimetembea kwa tents zote, wananiambia kuna jina. Mpaka sasa hivi mtoto amechoka, ameanza kulala.
Oh, ni jina gani unatumia?
Naomi.
Naomi ni N?
Naomi ni N.
Utauliza hapo mzee. How are you, sir? How is everything? You're the presiding officer? How are you? Okay, good. My name is Maina Kiai. Yeah, and I'm doing an observation. And I'm just very distressed.
Yeah.
There's no light.
There's no right because we are not supplied with the generator.
Oh, pressure, how many pressure lamps are you given?
Pressure lamps we have, I think they have 2. What's happening?
Where are the tents?
Tents we had
for here.
Very scarce.
Why? Why are they not supplying you?
We don't know. We don't know because they didn't supply.
Because now, you see, you can't even see the color of the lid. So some of those small technical things that began to raise questions about how prepared the IEBC was, and if it's not prepared, how willfully unprepared was it? The mechanical process of voting has actually been quite good in Kenya over the years. That's not where the problem arises in Kenya. It's always before and then after. Bomas, you really expected and wanted transparent process especially at the tally, because Kenya's problems of elections always happen at the tally. So that's the place where you expect as much openness as possible.
The results are continuing to stream in, to come in, though slowly now.
So we get into Bomas and you find all of a sudden, instead of transparency, you're finding policemen. Instead of getting information, you're finding closed off. How are you, sir? Now we're having problems, it seems, getting the camera in. Yeah? Why?
One, because according to communication protocol, we were told somebody must be cleared by manager, our manager communication.
He's cleared. He's got a badge. He has a badge to come in here. Oh gosh. We are at the tallying center, and as you can see, we have been put up at the top, even though we are domestic observers who should be watching the process as it happens on the ground. The tallying center receives the hard copy forms, and then they're checked and they're entered into a system so that you can have a tallying now at the national level.
As of 9:30 last night, we experienced a network slowdown, but that has been fixed, and the IEBC is confident that there will be successful completion of the counting and the transmission of the results as we see.
At some point during the process, the IEBC basically kicked out the agents of the presidential candidates out of the room and said they're costing them time, they're checking too much. In a sense, IEBC decided to sacrifice accuracy for speed. That by itself is a point of tension, because the agents are there to make sure that what is being announced, what's coming out, at least reflects what they should be getting from their own people on the ground.
Of the results that have just been announced, our people had not agreed and had not signed. And they had already agreed in the morning that nothing will be announced before all the agents actually check and agree and sign.
As the results are coming in, it becomes clear that, again, the electronic safeguards are supposed to help us are not working for us anymore. They're doing something funny.
The electronic vote transmission system had challenges, rendering some services on the main server non-functional. The Commission reverted to physical official results, which are final and authenticated by the documentation from the returning officers.
The return to manual was a signal that this is clear where it's going, because manual is the easiest system to manipulate. You will then tell the returning officers to come to Nairobi and bring your figures. No one now knows what the returning officers are announcing in the ground there and what they're announcing in Nairobi.
I was informed when I was at Nyambaria that some forts were added and some agents have stolen the evidence.
Nicholas Kipto Arab Korean Salat, 20,500. This is Kitur Kemoy. This is Nicholas Salat.
We can't announce the issue. We can't announce. We have issues.
The Coalition of Reforms and Democracy held a news conference this morning questioning the integrity of the tallying and saying some results had been doctored. And now you've said you're the returning officer of the presidential results. Have they written to you? Have they given you an official complaint?
No. Thank you.
Have they been doctored, the results?
Yes.
Have they been doctored?
No, of course not. This fact that we have now abandoned the electronic vote transmission does not in any way mean that the integrity of the results which are being announced are compromised.
Registered voters 56,999.
This form.
These are agents of candidates
with grievances,
with issues that they are raising. First of all, Kwanzaa, I think everybody is entitled, every Kenyan is entitled to raise an issue, but not everybody can come here. These are agents of candidates. They are raising issues. Listen to them.
IEBC still being given room. Please rectify. We are raising this. Please rectify the mistakes. Please don't take us there. And it's people almost pleading, in fact, with IEBC. It's not demanding. They're pleading. Please, you know the consequences of these actions. Please, just do it right. Do it as fairly as possible.
We will be announcing the results as soon as we finish processing. So we'd like to ask for your indulgence at this particular point in time. You will continue to be entertained by the choir.
By the last day, when now IEBC has to make an announcement to tell us that this is the election. Instead, we're hearing all these choirs coming on, singing songs, almost urging us to be patriotic and accept.
Total number of votes cast was 12,330,028. Since Uhuru Kenyatta has received 6,173,433, he has received more than 50.07%. He has also received more than 25% in at least 32 counties. I therefore declare Uhuru Kenyatta the duly elected President of the Republic of Kenya.
So immediately the election results are declared. Some people are jubilant and others are feeling bad because they're not declared the winner.
It is clear that the constitutionally sanctioned process of electing a new set of leaders to take us to the next level has been thwarted by another tainted election. We will therefore shortly move to court to challenge the outcome that the IEBC announced a few hours ago.
Civil society came together and began putting together a petition because the law allows us to challenge the declaration of the election.
We had 7 days to prepare the petition. We had a small group of volunteers in civil society. And what we did was basically download the forms that the IEBC had put on its website and tally them up.
Okay. Okay, thanks, that's fine.
I'm done, I'm ready to go.
Well, the first thing that was problematic was that the server that was being used to receive the results from the electronic results transmission system was being kept in a room that was accessible and shared by the Election Commission, the IEBC, and by the Kenyatta-Ruto Alliance. The second problem was that we had a lot of evidence from experts that said there was no way that server could have crashed. The server had been designed with the sole purpose of being able to receive a huge number of results from all those thousands of polling stations across the country. And in addition to that, we were concerned because the total number of registered voters kept changing. So it wasn't just that there was a provisional register in December and then a final one in February. No, in fact, there was another one that was circulating on election day that political parties had been given. And then there was a different number when the IEBC announced the final result.
Our position was very, very clear. It was not about the result, it was about the process. It is the process that determines results. So if you have a good process, then the result will be fine, whichever way it goes.
Like from one opponent?
But we also had another tool, which is we had video clips. The teams from InformAction had been around the polling stations, the tallying stations, and we were really feeling good that this would be the first time perhaps that video clips would be used in court and hopefully then show without a shadow of a doubt that the election had been irredeemably messed up. There is a safety valve that had been built in to the Constitution, which is the Supreme Court. Again, at that point, very respected, at that point, very highly regarded, and almost every Kenyan feeling that the Supreme Court, if something goes wrong, we can always go to the Supreme Court, it will rectify.
This pre-trial conference begins a week of the hearing for the three petitions filed.
The Supreme Court's process starts quite well. They come in, there's a lot of respect, there's a lot of hope, there's a lot of uncertainty, as it should be.
My Lord, it is my humble submission that when you're exercising your jurisdiction in a presidential petition, it is not in the interest of the contestants. It is in the interest of the Republic of Kenya, the citizens of this country. Article 81 of the Constitution.
Our argument was that the presidential election was so bad that it should be redone. It's a difficult argument to make because you're basically saying that the 50 billion plus shillings that's been spent has been wasted. Very early in the process of the court, there's a decision to consolidate the cases together to make it one. So there's the case by opposition on the results and the case on civil society on the process. However, what we saw with the consolidation is that then the focus became only on the opposition case. It's about the results, the figures and numbers.
Senior Counsel Oraro.
At the beginning of the case, the opposition presented additional evidence that would have helped their case.
And when we look at these documents, we find that by small tallies, there were additions of votes for one candidate, deduction for another candidate, which were in Form 34, but not reflected in Form 36 and not in the results. And when you take totality of that manipulation, you end up with a situation where the results are well below what was reflected to the public.
The court decided to throw out that evidence, not because they looked at it, but on the basis of procedure. Even though the Constitution is very clear about always putting substance over procedure in documenting or dealing with evidence. Understanding why the servers crashed was a crucial point within the whole process of the election, because it was when the servers crashed that the election stopped being electronic. The safeguards that had been built through the electronic system and the servers were no longer existing, and we're back to 2007 manual election.
My Lord, there are 6 servers which they used at the headquarters. All we are asking for are the electronic logs.
The IBC opposes the application. For you to give them the information, that is the logs and the MAC addresses and the IP addresses, you need to give them the equipment as well to be able to undertake. So essentially, they are asking you to audit the entire registration process.
All that was being asked for was the logs of the server, which is simply the detailed information of the activity of the server from at any given time.
It is my humble submission that the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission are obliged under the Constitution to be accountable. That means responsible and answerable. Those logs that the petitioner is requesting for will go to show why there was that failure.
The court really has no role to play in this matter. This application is really an abuse of court process. Nobody, including, I think, the petitioner, really knows the real purpose of this. And my lord, it ought to be dismissed.
Why were they so afraid of us as a country, knowing why this electronic safeguard collapsed?
How are we supposed to verify the fact that there was a failure of an instrument if we are not able to dig out the electronic log and know exactly what the machine said?
So just to help me and my colleagues to appreciate the gist of that application, what specific allegation in the petition do you hope to prove?
My lord, there is a specific pleading that the system as set up was set up to fail.
There shall be a register. 1.
One of the key recommendations from following the crisis in 2008 was the register.
IEBC had an obligation to observe the Constitution and the law. My lord, you've been told about a special register. You've been told about the Green Book. My lords, I will challenge the IEBC to look at our Elections Act, to look at our Constitution, and find me a Green Book.
What constitutes the principal register of voters would be the group of about 14 million odd whose BVR was captured at the registration process.
Are you suggesting that the principal register of voters actually is more than one register? It's not one document, but several, but called principal?
Yes, it's one and the same, my lord.
We discovered in arguing for the register that actually it turned out that there was not just one register, but a number of registers. And also it's not even a register with an opening date and a closing date. Instead, we have a data system where names can come in, can go out, can be changed. And so the whole integrity of registration and the reason for registration then disappears.
There shall be a scrutiny of all Forms 36.
There was excitement when the judges ordered for scrutiny of all Form 36 and 34. The scrutiny was held at the Kenyatta International Conference Center, about 200 meters away from the Supreme Court. We had our observers and monitors in that room like every other party to the petition.
During the retallying, we expected for the judicial staff to see everything we had been seeing for those days. All the errors on the forms, all the places where things didn't add up, all the places where there were no forms, you know, all those things. And they were noted.
But then they started coming back to us to tell us they were uneasy, they're having difficulties, there's some bit of bullying. So that's when I decided to try and go in so we could see if we could record that process. And when we got there, there's a lot of tension and nervousness going on in there. Now we know that the IEBC had more people than anybody else in that room, but they seem to have more access, even though they're also a party to the case, to the judges and to the whole process.
We're not doing the history.
No. Why?
It's not allowed.
By trying to go into that scrutiny room, I believe I achieved a sense of questioning about the process.
No, just leave, please.
You're allowing cameras into the courtroom. That scrutiny room is a part of the courtroom.
All they did was look again at the forms from those polling stations and just sort of very closely scrutinize them and do a recount. But even that showed there were between 16 and 18 stations that showed over 100% turnout. In some cases, the turnout was over 200%. In some cases, the turnout was over 200% for those polling stations. None of that came out in the final report to the judges.
We now know that the report given to the judges by the judicial officials was not what transpired in that room. And maybe that is what they wanted to hide.
Yes. Last night, Mr. Kiai went to the tallying center at KCC with a cameraman, and it's reported that you gave the security a hard time there.
What I was doing there is consistent with what I'm doing here. We are filming these proceedings as part of a film on the constitutionalism of this country. That's an extension of the court. The filming was not done inside, it was done outside, but I think the point we're making is that this is a whole process which needs to be taken and recorded for the sake of this country. The civil society petition included video evidence that we thought would turn the tide in this case.
We are going to show a video in Nyeri County. My lords, that is a county tallying officer. And you can see there's a microphone for citizen. More importantly, he's holding a form. He's reading results from a form. And you can see his assistants have a laptop.
So the total votes cast in Nyeri County in the presidential election were 331,002.
When the results for Nyeri County were announced, the president-elect had 318,880, 1,000 plus more votes. His closest contestant at Nyeri County in Central Province, Raila Odinga had 6,075 votes. 6,075 people voted for Raila Odinga in Nyeri County. The result that was declared for this nation was 5,638. He's not the only one. Kiapi lost votes. I mean, even the little you have will be taken away from you. Karua lost votes. Dida lost votes. Musalia Mudavadi lost votes. Paul Kibwige Mwite lost votes. You do not have this form that this man is reading. How can you verify the results of Nyeri County? It is my humble submission that the Form 36 that the IEBC produced before you is vitiated by fraud. Fraud of every Kenyan voter who voted for their favorite presidential candidate other than the president-elect in his stronghold. It's a fraud because it is in breach of the law. It is in breach of the Constitution. Daylight theft.
She cannot disprove that that video was stage managed or recorded in River Road. I don't know what it was.
One of the lawyers then says that this looks like it could have come from anywhere. But had he read the petition of civil society, he would have found all the evidence to show who filmed it, how it was filmed, and that was accepted by the court.
I think it is good, especially for a young court like this, which is crawling, I think, if I may put it, in terms of, age. I think it is good for it to show judicial restraint. You will find opportunities later in life where you can express yourself more.
As the case progressed, we started seeing a difference in attitude from the establishment lawyers. They became haughty, they became arrogant, they became patronizing, not just to the lawyers of the opposition and civil society, but even to the judges of the Supreme Court. And they would demean them. And the judges of the Supreme Court would just stand by and laugh like it's a big joke. In fact, you got a sense as the case progressed towards the end of it that actually the people in control of that case was the establishment lawyers, not the judges.
The political contest has been viewed by peer groups as being fair and credible. They had observer status. They had people throughout the country who looked at all the electoral processes. There was nothing massively wrong with the elections.
There was nervousness as we waited the decision to be announced. I think for me, the crucial part was really, will there be courage or not? Because if you look through history, overturning an election result doesn't happen easily. It doesn't happen easily.
After extensive deliberations, we are happy to announce the Supreme Court has reached a unanimous decision.
The moment the Chief Justice announced that we have reached a unanimous decision, I knew it was finished. Just the logic of it meant that unanimous can only mean the lowest common denominator.
It is the decision of the court that the said elections were indeed conducted in compliance with the Constitution and the law. It is the decision of the court that the third and fourth respondents were validly elected. The detailed judgment containing reasons for decision of the court will be issued within 2 weeks from today. God bless Kenya.
My thought after the decision was given was, my goodness, even that institution we thought was credible has failed us. The judgment was very divisive. Many of us were just numb. The safety valve of the Supreme Court worked in that instance, but it destroyed the credibility of the court and removed the Supreme Court as a future safety valve for this country. So as soon as the Supreme Court made its decision public on that Saturday, of course there was going to be reactions. There were protests in Kisumu, which is the stronghold of the opposition leader. But the press basically ignored the entire protest. There's an attempt by the media and by the state to give the narrative that everybody is happy, called accept and move on. But when it came to civil society, then the regime and its people began calling them evil society. And evil society in this context means people who are not accepting the basic narrative.
You've been told many of the reasons why we went to court. What motivated us was not any particular interest in whether this candidate or the other should have won, but in the process, because we believe that it's critical that our processes and our institutions work as they are supposed to do, because without this, we have no recourse other than the sort of situation we saw in 2008.
The Supreme Court has spoken. Why are we continuing? Well, because the Supreme Court can be wrong. And there are many instances where Supreme Courts have been wrong. It's so crucial for us across the world to take the issue of elections very, very seriously. We've got to say that we cannot accept, the same way we don't accept military coups, we must not accept civilian coups, because they'll have an impact, and it's always a negative impact. Once Kenyatta and Ruto became president and deputy president respectively, they very quickly and very successfully turned their personal challenges into something about Kenya. One of the most interesting things during the campaign is Kenyatta being asked in a debate about the ICC and whether he would be able, if he became a head of state, to continue running the country and handling ICC. And his response was that, no, this is a personal challenge. I will deal with it personally as I go on dealing with the affairs of state. Literally 3 months after he became president, it changed. It's no longer personal, it's now a national issue. So they take a number of very quick steps. First of all is galvanizing Africa and African Union leaders, not the people, to help them beat these charges. And you start seeing a flurry of activities at the African Union in Addis Ababa, which are concentrating on ICC. And essentially, African leaders pushing ICC to say, please stop these cases because these are against heads of state. The problem of putting some people above the law is that you then inculcate a culture of impunity. As long as I'm president, I can do whatever I want, nothing will ever happen. I can steal as much money as I want, nothing will ever happen. I can kill as many people as I want, nothing will ever happen. And of course, once the president has that sense, it trickles very quickly to people in authority. Because, you know, if the president can do it, why can't I do it? Now, the British had told us that there will be minimal contact as long as the case was continuing. But as soon as the Supreme Court made its decision, Kenyatta's one of his first international trips was to London. So here you find a country that had pushed democracy, had pushed human rights, had pushed accountability as part of the strategic interest, pulling back on that and saying, actually, that's not so important anymore. Commercial interests are important, Somalia is important, security is important. They're way more important than democracy and accountability. Thank you very much. Kenya has just had another election that was flawed, particularly in the failure, the spectacular collapse, you could call it, of the systems there, largely funded by donors. How should donors hold the government of Kenya or the election body accountable for this kind of things?
You pay and put in electoral systems and expertise, but that doesn't give you a right to replace the sovereignty of the country. It's still Kenya's election. I suppose if I was to criticize the donors, it's why are you so surprised? I mean, good election practice starts with everybody being committed to an honest outcome. The technology of observing votes and doing sort of secondary vote counts and checks is always that. It's a technology that can aid people with an honest ambition for a fair result. Having reached out to President Kenyatta in a way that they promised they wouldn't before the election, you know, are they going to use that re-engagement with him to press for him to genuinely subject himself to the full authority of the Hague Court? If indeed, though, it reflects no more than a pulling up of a white flag, okay, you won, we was wrong, we accept the new status quo and there's no more talking about the past, then that would be a terrible moral failure.
If you read the reports of many of the observers, they document list after list of complete irregularity. Then you read the conclusion, it says it's okay. It is basically telling us as Africans, please accept less than anybody else. No, he wanted to specifically reflect the will of the people.
Elections that he was seen by. What we found was that many of the things that were put in place to protect the electoral process failed. I think overall the domestic observers found that the kits failed in the majority of polling stations at some point during the day. There was also a major failure in the way that results were transmitted. And in that sense, I think it may even be a worse election from the procedural point of view than 2007. Because more things failed. So in a sense, the peaceful election is obscuring the critical attitudes towards actually what happened. And one of the things that I think we need to realize is that if we have an election that bad again, we may not be so lucky.
Yet almost all the observers have said this election was acceptable, free and fair, the terms that are used. Why do you think they're doing that?
I think many of the observers have a very difficult position. Look, the observers are kind of undermined in their ability to say something particularly critical. The second is really a political control. In many cases, these aren't really independent. They need to come up with findings that are going to be acceptable to the countries or the organizations behind the election observation team. They also don't want to go against what they see as being the domestic process. I think once the Supreme Court in Kenya had come out and validated the result, many of the observers felt it would be very difficult for them then to criticise the process because it would be going against the Supreme Court, which they felt, at least in this election, was a reasonably independent body led by a reasonably independent figure.
So given that context, then what's the use of having observers if all they're going to do is endorse a political line from headquarters or from a country? What's the use of having international observers?
Well, I think you can make a great use of observers if what the observers do is to make it so that people in the country are less willing to use election rigging. But you're also right that there's a real danger of having monitors give a false sense of legitimacy and security to election results that they don't really merit.
I think the Americans eventually came to terms with the fact of Kenyatta being president. You see them taking a longer time to normalize the relationships with the Kenyatta regime. That came, of course, after the terror attack on Westgate. The number of series of attacks of terrorism affecting Kenya and affecting the region. Terror attacks on Kenya after the elections have had the consequence of reasserting Kenya into the international scene as now a partner, as opposed to being a pariah. The response by the Kenyan regime on the terror attacks have also had the consequence of dividing us further. So there's been more division, there's been more repression as well, because the inclination by the regime to accumulate more and more powers. Post-election, Kenyatta's strategy and Kenyatta's priority at the international level was to finish the cases against him. The case that was put forward by the prosecution of the International Criminal Court was not weak. It's a strong case. What they needed was verification. They made some mistakes, clearly, which is that they didn't get all the evidence in time. And it seems to me as an observer of the court that they were collecting the evidence in stages. Ultimately, when you move that slow, then you're giving room to people who are accused to damage the evidence.
Yes.
What we saw is a lot of people who would be first-hand witnesses dying, killed, disappearing.
The defense have suggested that the prosecution has no case.
The whole circumstances of evidence gathering through alleged witnesses was one that utterly failed to meet any acceptable standards.
One of the most troubling aspects of this case has been intimidation of witnesses. In the meetings I have held with victims, they very frequently raise this issue. They want to know what the court is doing about it, giving its potentially devastating impact on the administration of justice.
For example, one of the most well-known cases is a man who was the spokesperson of the Mungiki group. Now, Mungiki was the group that is allegedly used by Kenyatta to cause mayhem and attack and kill people in Naivasha and Nakuru. So he noticed people were following him, and he then decided the best thing is to go into a shop, kind of sure that once there are people in the shop, you're safe. These two men came into the shop, shot him, and then just walked away. Now, I don't know whether he was a witness for the prosecution, but I know he was a witness in terms of the list of people named who were at a meeting that was planning these atrocities. Anybody who came out as a witness in these cases, both the Ruto case and the Kenyatta case, for me was a very brave person, because you have to be from the community. Why come you're not putting a picture of the victims?
this is a wide scheme to discredit us and our country.
I think our government is more than committed to justice.
On the 3rd of December 2014, the judges of Trial Chamber 5B of the International Criminal Court declined to further adjourn the trial of Mr. Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Accordingly, given the state of the evidence in this case, I have no alternative but to withdraw the charges against Mr. Kenyatta.
Not just in Africa, but even... I want to take you first to one of your first statements on the Kenya cases, where you said that your responsibility was to prosecute regardless of the status of anybody.
After the elections and they came into power, the case changed a lot, because now we are faced with a situation in which the persons that we have already charged before the judges of the ICC, whose cases have been confirmed before the judges of the ICC, are now the leaders in Kenya. Indeed, we have been able to see that there is a scheme in which several people were involved, and they were going after different witnesses, not just even only in Kenya, but also those who were outside of Kenya.
And what about government cooperation before 2013 election and after? Has there been a difference?
We were confronted with so much attack against the court in terms of interfering with the witnesses, trying to amend the rules. In one instance, they were successful, trying to amend the statute, attacking the ICC at the African Union, unfortunately, and coming up with all sorts of resolutions. Attempts at the United Nations Security Council for deferral, which maybe is their right to do, because, but in the media, attacks in the media, in social media, attempts to expose the witnesses. There were so many attacks against the court, and perhaps has maybe demonstrated that if you are able to do all these things against the case, you can actually succeed in making the case go away, unfortunately. It has gone away for now because of all these difficulties that, that has been made against the case, and for now, impunity reigns, for now.
In Kenya's history, from independence, we have seen assassinations of opposition leaders, assassinations of key people, political infighting leading to assassinations, nothing ever happening. We've seen the state actually have a policy of torture in the Nyayo House torture. We've had a policy of the state massacring people and getting away with it in Wagala, in northern Kenya. A state that has been used to eliminating people and getting away with it doesn't just stop unless something dramatic happens.
It is really a dark day for justice for the victims of these crimes. And I believe that the victims have been denied justice in this situation.
Some of the victims that I've been in touch with epitomize different things to me and to the work I do.
Waliniangusha hapo na wakararua nguo yangu. Mwingine akaanza, huyo mwenye alinifikia kwanza akaanza akamaliza. Tena mwingine akaanza akamaliza. Tena ingine.
Dorothy was evicted from Naivasha after going through horrible gang rape. She was courageous and she was quite open about the rape and about her HIV status, that she was HIV positive. She tried to make a life for herself, was working as a barmaid in certain places in Kisumu, was isolated from her family, they didn't want anything to do with her. She couldn't find a way to fit in. The idea of going back to Naivasha was, I think in Dorothy's mind, was supposed to be therapeutic, to go back and to conquer the demons of Naivasha. Sadly, when she went there, the reaction of the community hadn't changed since 2008. But there was something good out of that Naivasha trip for her, which is her meeting with Mary. You ni Mary.
Mary.
Mimi nilikuwa nafikiria Wakikuyu wanafanyia Wajaluo peke yao. Sikujua kama Wakikuyu pia wameumia.
Wenyewe tumeumia.
Hiyo sasa stage yenye niko naye ni kujikasa tu venye sasa imekuwa.
Ingawaje nilikuwa nikiumia mpaka wakati mwingine nasema heri hata mimi ningekufa, lakini hakuna haja.
When Dorothy was in hospital, Maurice Anya, who was the lawyer for the victims at the ICC, came to see her and asked her if she was willing to be a witness on the victim side. And Dorothy did not hesitate one bit. She said yes. Dorothy eventually died. The only place that we could find to bury Dorothy was in the communal cemetery, which under Luo custom is really wasteland. But there was no other place to bury her. She was forgotten, abandoned not just by the state, but even by the political elite of Luo Nyanza. Mary, leo umefika Kisumu na ni mara yako ya kwanza.
Kuna rafiki yangu mwenye anaitwa Dorothy aliaga dunia. Mimi ningeomba tu kwa wakubwa wetu, wakati wanatafuta hata kama ni kura, hata kama ni nini, wawache kutumia watu ili kupigana sisi wenyewe kwa wenyewe. Ujua wakati ndume mbili wanapong'ang'ana, nyasi ndio huwa inaumia.
And then there is Summary, whose son disappeared during that time. It's not clear whether he was part or not part of the protesters in Rift Valley. Her son disappeared.
Where?
In Kapsoit.
No. That one you can do. You cannot do it in the police station. She will report it by herself.
No, I'm going with her because I'm her lawyer.
No.
No, listen, sir. Mr. Katogo, please. Let me tell you something. Nobody, again, has come to help. Not the Kalenjin political elite, not the state, not anybody. So she's left in a void all alone, wondering, is my son dead? Is he alive? What could have happened? Is he in jail?
And he was there 2007.
What is the mood within the victims you represent now at this stage of the process of the International Criminal Court?
After years of promises, the victims are now looking at a situation where there is no reasonable prospect in the foreseeable future of a trial against anyone for the crimes committed on that side of the post-election violence.
Kenyatta and Ruto came together and decided that they're going to finish this whole issue of IDPs. So they came up with this solution that they're going to pay every single IDP 410,000 Kenya shillings, which would then enable them to find a little piece of land or build a little shack and be able to start life afresh.
It seems to be that many of the victims that did receive the 400,000 shillings are supporters of the President and the Deputy President, and if you come from a group which doesn't happen to support the President or the Deputy President, you won't get your 400,000 shillings.
410,000
The IDPs of the post-election violence have shown tremendous courage in a way that is different from many Kenyans we are seeing. And maybe it's because they are desperate. They have no more choices.
these people are out here, they are integrated, they've not been compensated. Others are being compensated at 410,000 shillings. But these guys, as you can see, they are forgotten. And therefore, we hope the authorities will get to learn this so that there is fairness, equality across the nation.
The way forward for victims, IDP survivors is them taking the issues in their own hands, them organizing themselves.
Hatuvuji sheria, kwa nini sisi munatuvujia sheria? Sisi kama wadhiriwa, kwa nini munatuvujia sheria? Ninauliza.
So it's absolutely essential that we all learn from these IDPs and we start confronting our fears. For crying out loud, if they can stand up and march, then why can't the rest of the country stand up and march peacefully? Oftentimes in society, when peaceful protests do not get what it is that they need, it is very easy for that to transform into something else. Impunity the world over has been the bane of human rights. Human rights is about fighting impunity. Now, we have to ask ourselves, did Kenyatta and his team write the guidebook to impunity? I think they have, within the context. But I take solace in Martin Luther King's words that the arc of history bends towards justice. Ultimately, justice will out.